Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Moose Hunt Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Richards. Very excited today as we have a very special episode in store for you. On today's episode, we're going to sit down with OMM Outfitters owner Nathan Theriault for an in-depth discussion with and special guest Dan Cabela. This conversation occurs the evening after Dan actually harvested a black bear with OMM Outfitters in northern Maine. We sit down with him and share congratulations of a successful hunt, and then quickly jump into an in-depth discussion around a current project Dan is working on called Hard Truths in Conservation. This television program can be viewed on the outdoor block of the History Channel and airs at 9 a.m. Eastern Time on Saturday. We sit down and discuss hunting, its role in conservation, and the importance of it, particularly in today's modern world. The entire crew at OMM Outfitters really wants to make a point to thank Dan for hunting with us and for taking the time to sit down and have such an exciting and in-depth conversation on such important topics for our listeners out there. So sit back, relax, folks, and enjoy. Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Moose Hunt Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Chris Richards. Very excited today because we have a very special episode. Coming to you from the gorgeous Eagle Lake sporting camps in beautiful Eagle Lake, Maine towards the end of September. And today I'm joined by our dear friend, owner of OMM Outfitters, Mr. Nathan Theriault. And new to the podcast, special guest, Mr. Dan Cabela, conservationist, hunter, outdoor leader. And Dan, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us. How are you today?
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you here, Dan.
And really exciting. We're actually here at the end of one of our weeks of bear season.
Week 3.
Week 3. And Dan, congratulations. Got
Thank
a bear
you.
today.
Yeah, today was a very eventful day.
Yeah.
It was the last day of our bear hunt, and we got it done this afternoon. And Nathan's team worked incredibly hard and never gave up, and we never gave up, and we got it done. So it was a good day.
Perseverance, as always, can push through. And I was so excited because I was driving up today to record this, actually, Dan. And Nate let me know, Dan will be here. We can jump on an episode. Really excited. And he goes, he hasn't got a bear yet. And I'm like, oh. All right. Well, I'll see you in 3 hours. So I'm coming.
I was the only one stressed out, by the way.
Yeah.
And there may not have been a podcast if we were still out there at this point. But.
Exactly.
Well, I didn't know if he's going to, if Nate was going to say, Chris, you better get your camel on and get out here because calling in reinforcements. But, Dan, the title of this podcast is, the Moose Hunt Podcast. But, certainly we're passionate about the outdoors, about hunting, whitetails, bear, whatever. And particularly also really excited about this project and doing these, engaging in conversations related to the outdoors. And particularly the area of conservation, which I know is something you're deeply passionate about. And certainly we'll probably get into some moose hunting a little later on, but really want to jump into this social topic of conservation and hunting as a part of that. And I know you've had projects for years, and certainly one you're currently working on, discussing those issues in society today. And I'm just interested, could you kind of share some of your goals, what that project is, and kind of the key things you're working on with that?
Jump in on that too. Even some of the family history and, just what your mom and dad have done over the years and Cabela's. And I mean, it's just, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I grew up in rural Nebraska, and my folks, they started Cabela's, which, ended up being a very large company and world's foremost outfitter.
Right.
But it wasn't always that way,
Yeah.
So when I was young, my parents worked, 14, 15-hour days. They had a very large family. We got out, we hunted when I was young, mostly waterfowl, upland game. Big game didn't happen for me until probably late teens, early 20s.
Yeah.
I think Nathan was guiding when he was like 8, so he had a little bit
In
up
the
on
backyard.
Yeah. Squirrel guide.
Yeah.
But yeah, so from 1961, which I wasn't born yet, even though Nathan thinks I was. I was born a little later, but from 1961 till about the mid 80s, that the company was just kind of baby steps being built, and my parents working very hard. And mid 80s, it started to take off, and direct marketing kind of became a thing. And I was a teenager at that point. And at that point, we started 1990. We started the foundation.
Wow.
And in the beginnings of the foundation, it was we were running a company, so the foundation was kind of secondary, but it was something that we wanted to do,
right.
Or my folks wanted to do. And so in the beginning, we mostly just supported organizations like the NRA and the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation and things like that. And for basically, I don't know, 25 years or so, we mostly wrote checks in support of various conservation organizations. And then we sold the company, and at that point, our foundation kind of took on a new role, because we no longer had the company that we were running that was taking all of our time. So at this point, it became, okay, let's change the way we're doing things with the foundation, and let's actually do some things that are more organic, things that we can get involved in, things that have high impact, things that show what hunters actually do, on a hands-on way. So from I guess around 2017 till now, we have focused really more in high impact, hands-on conservation initiatives that have that will show what our outdoor community actually is involved in, and the support that we give for wildlife conservation.
Right. Which is quite the progression and maturing of that is fantastic. And I see some of the stories online with lions and various stories, and it's really exciting to see that. And telling this story of hunters in conservation as a tool, and frankly the responsibility we have, I think is really something that's exciting to have seen come through in some of the work you've done. When you think about some of the more like recent work you've done around these things, what are some of the key like big takeaways you have from like the cultural aspect of hunting that you see regionally around these issues of indigenous peoples or whatever they may be? What are some of the kind of the surprises you've had along the way?
Well, I think it varies obviously from globally. It's entirely different than in Maine as compared to Mozambique or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think when you break it down, you look at Maine. I mean, this is a vast wilderness area.
Right.
It's we're in a rural area. I would guess tourism, and Nathan can obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but I would guess tourism, recreation, hunting and fishing kind of keep this a pristine place. I mean, a lot of people, and a lot of folks don't realize that. They see mountains, they see trees, they think that these things just exist to exist, but there are actually things that support these ecosystems. I was just in Northwest Territories the last couple of weeks doing a sheep hunt, and I was talking to my guide, and I said, we've been here for 10 days. We've seen lots of wildlife. We've been seeing incredible sunsets, vistas. Haven't seen another human being. We've been covering probably 10 to 15 miles a day on foot per day.
Right.
I said, what other land use happens here other than recreation and hunting to protect this vast space? And he said nothing.
Right.
I mean, when you think about that, we're used to being around people, cities, things like that. You go into an open space. I mean, how do those places exist?
Right.
Whether it's Africa, whether it's Canada, whether it's Maine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they exist because hunting dollars, recreation, people utilizing those vast systems. I mean, those are the reasons they're there. I mean,
yeah.
And I think that needs to be told. To look at a bighorn sheep on the top of a mountain in Nevada, for the average person, it's a beautiful sight. But they don't realize that in the 1970s, there were no bighorn sheep in Nevada.
Right.
So how did they get back to Nevada? And what was the process of bringing them back to Nevada so the general public can see those beautiful sheep on those mountains? Well,
you guys helped with that.
Yeah. And it was all through hunting,
right?
And hunting dollars and Pittman Robertson. I mean, there's so many different ways. I mean, private groups. The passion that's involved from the hunting community to protect these wild spaces and the wildlife that exists in them. I mean, it's never ending.
I think, one interesting thing you share there, Dan, is that piece of Maine, and it is unique. I grew up in like western rural Maine, a lot like up here, frankly, where we are right now, where commercial timberlands and outdoor recreation where industries wanted to. My wife, the best thing that ever happened to me is from East Northport, Long Island, New York. So we grew up on different planets. And it is fascinating to have seen that perspective, in my own life when, we go to a region like Moosehead Lake or whatever it is. And I see a moose, and I've seen, I don't know how, a billion moose. And I'm like, jump out, got the phone, taking pictures. And she's like, how many of these have you seen? I'm like, not enough.
Need more.
Not enough. But I think with another thing that, to step back a bit, when you talked about the progression of, the company your family had, it's also funny when I talk to Nate a lot about these topics is also here. I hear that a lot of. It wasn't always this way. And really to see the progression that we all make, maturing in this, I guess, if you will, from hunters who grow up with the BB gun and following dad around a bit, and these responsibilities that various people have as they progress through. Nathan, you jumping on taking this outfitter, it's grown and grown and grown. And then to kind of start to engage in policy, helping to advocate for wildlife and those types of things. Kind of what are some thoughts you have around your own experience in that?
Yeah, it's funny because, what Dan's doing, he's on the forefront in that foundation and what the Cabela's family has done, not just internationally, but also in this country, but, on a small scale, management, bringing people to enjoy the resources in this state is important. It's important because it shows people a different area. It's important because they have an opportunity to explore the resources, but they also have an opportunity to potentially be successful, which is huge for management. And without Dan being here this week and him being successful in that harvest, that bear potentially could go on and eat 100 moose calves, and everyone knows I love moose, so that wouldn't be a good thing. So thank you, Dan. And
hence the name of the podcast, right?
So it all comes back to moose with me. But no, it's really cool. This is a very small piece, in a broader spectrum, and to have Dan here, talking about conservation and his show. Now that people can kind of see and relate to and understand the importance. Like we had Randy Cross here actually.
Yeah.
This week, Randy, 30 plus years as a bear biologist. Somebody I look up to, the knowledge he has, the heart that he has for it, kind of reminds me of how I feel about moose. But
Right.
what he knows about bear is absolutely incredible. And to have had him up here to collaborate with Dan and his show, it really, and I'm sure we'll talk more about the show, but, just really kind of brings it full circle and helps people to understand the importance of what we do here.
So Dan, the show currently, Hard Truths in Conservation. What an awesome title. I have to say, I've seen the first couple episodes and it is fantastic. And what I particularly admire about how you handled this, project you're working on is really engaging with the idea that hunting has become a controversial practice, in modern times. I'm not entirely sure when that started. Do you, from your perspective, when did that really begin?
I mean, I don't have data to support it, but I would say in the 1980s is when you started to kind of see that shift. And it was at that point it was minor compared to today, but that's when it started to grow, and I think that we just kind of missed it, and unfortunately, we're really going back and explaining things that were really accepted from the 1970s, all the way back.
Right.
That we actually harvest the meat, that we take mature animals, we eat the meat, we share the meat. Somewhere we lost that message, and I've talked to several people about it. It's kind of amazing that we have to go back and explain that, but I think we do. I think it's important that we do that because somewhere along the way that was stolen from us.
Yeah.
And some of that's our fault. Just for not defending it and not actually speaking up about it.
Staying silent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course you got social media and people with their cell phones walking around.
Lots of misinformation.
Lots of misinformation. Even Randy talked about it. Theories. People have these theories, and whether they're right or wrong, they can put it out there, and millions of people can see it.
And you touched on this, Nate. I wasn't going to bring this up for a little bit, but it's a perfect segue. I think the social media is such a powerful tool. It really is, to engage with millions of people. Nate, we're kind of at that age that we're like the last generation that can remember not having the internet and social media then having it. We really
trying to love it.
We really lived on both sides of the fence.
Yeah.
But I really believe it's one of our greatest challenges as hunters. Stay tuned, folks, while we take a brief break for a word from our sponsors.
If you're looking to have a once-in-a-lifetime experience to go after big game or small game, look no further than OMM Outfitters. Here, we offer a world-class experience, destination, with a staff that's looking to help you make the most memories possible. I'm Nathan Theriault with OMM Outfitters, and we encourage you to take a look at what we have to offer, and we're excited to have you visit our world-class operation. Please visit our website at www.ommoutfitters.com.
And now, let's get back to the podcast. What we put out there, the image we put, and frankly, even our own fights that happen on it. I've come to have the opinion that
to engage or not to engage.
Right. Or
shoot missile or not.
Right. If you feel yourself like getting tense with your phone, you probably should set it down.
Yeah. You don't want to be breaking a phone.
Take a breather. But I really think that's a key lesson for us all to take. To Dan's point, almost a potentially negligence initially.
Yeah.
This has always been here. It always will be. We'll always have access. A lot of that's changed.
Yeah, definitely not We can't take it for granted.
And I think in a changing world, we have to change. I mean, I think resistance to change is not a good road to go down. I mean, I think we have to change. We might think that we've always done it this way and this is how it should be, but we're losing ground.
Right.
I mean, you have to change. And the messaging, social media can be very, very good for our community or very bad for our community. It just depends on how we handle it.
Let me just correct it. When you say we have to change our approach, is what you're talking about, not necessarily change what our traditions are and our conservation approach.
But the way that we communicate it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, the way that we portray our community. You know what I'm saying? So taking the time to actually explain a post or get in depth on a post versus, just throwing a picture out there. In this day and age, it's worth the effort.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I know what we try to do, just on a small scale, no blood in the pictures, make that animal look presentable, respect for the animal. We avoid hanging shots, animals hanging out of the backs of trucks, everything. I'll tell you, and Reno, your videographer here, I took a lot from the Africans because they really respect the wildlife.
Yes.
And that's where a lot of, where our, that we guide training, what do we spend? An hour?
Hours on photography.
Just on photography, and just little things like people can be doing that just helps the image. And like you said, Dan, I mean, just explaining more, don't just put the picture out there. Explain, this, why this happened, and it filled the freezer, it's going to feed our family for, months, over the year or whatever it is. And, just having that approach, like you said, is, I think, super important. Take baby steps to get it back to, where we can fight the fight again.
I do think that there is a pretty big movement to do that, though. That the more you look now, if you compare it to 5 years ago, it's changed. I think there's a big effort in the outdoor community to get back to the basics and actually get back to the things that we took for granted that we all know.
Right.
But we need to explain it again. I mean, we just need to re-explain it.
Yep.
I mean, we all know that if we shoot doves, we take them home and we eat them and provide, and but we took for granted that we thought everybody understood that that's what was going on. So if you shoot a big moose, I mean that's a year's worth of food.
Yes.
And not only for your family, but your friends, your neighbors, because we all share, and that goes a long ways.
Yeah.
And it's important to talk about that. It's also important to talk about, instead of, using the terms trophy and things like that, which, don't bother me because I'm a part of this community, but it does bother other people. So right. I mean, maybe it's better to say, if you want to harvest an old mature moose, they just happen to be the biggest.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. That's a great point, because you often hear that trophy hunting comes in as this bad term today.
Yeah.
I know another good one, hit list. But, and I know that doesn't sound good, but, the reality is what a hit list is the animals that we know we need to take out of the population. The older animals, let the younger genetics come up through and harvest the past prime animals, which is best for the population.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think one thing too that I always would encourage hunters, look at the circle you walk in, and what is the example you're setting, or what is the reputation you're giving non-hunters. There's anti-hunters out there. We get that, but there's a lot of people who just don't hunt, that they don't really know how they feel, didn't grow up in it like we all. I mean, I didn't have a chance to not hunt in my family. I had it both sides. But I really take a lot of pride in personally. I work at a university in a leadership role, And I'm around a lot of people who don't hunt. And I take great pride in being the one who's putting in the vacation request to go moose guiding, because it's unique and brings a engagement opportunity. And I think the table fare sharing is one of the most relevant ways, I think, to pull people in.
Without a doubt, especially with COVID and the other things. So food security is obviously a huge deal right now.
Right.
And it's a great opportunity for us to spread our message. Mm-hmm. It's something we've been doing since the beginning, sharing food.
Yes.
And it's something that, younger, you're at a college, younger folks like very healthy, high protein food without steroids and other things in it. So there's a lot of people who may not be hunters, but they would still like to eat natural food.
Right. I have a good friend of mine. He's not a hunter, but he'll hear, Chris got a buck. Hey, I remember last year you left me off a few packages of steak. You're going to do that again? I'm like, yes.
Yeah, that's like a once every 5 years buck, Chris.
Yeah. It's happening again. It's happening again.
I hope it does.
I hope it does too. And, another thing too around hunting is sometimes people can have memories of things that weren't necessarily good for the animals that people associated as good. And Nathan's going to know exactly what I'm talking about here, because we're talking Maine moose. Sometimes I hear people talk about, I can remember driving this road in Rangeley at night in 1999, and there was a collision on this road 3 nights a week, all summer long. And what people really remember is an overabundance of moose, an unsustainable population of moose. Yes, they might have been all over the road and anyone could see one driving down a paved road, but it really wasn't a good thing for drivers.
Made the car insurance expensive.
That's right. And
I will say, though, there are certain times of the year you still got to watch out.
Oh, you do. You do. But I really think that's a key point to remember. Regulation of herd really is something we do.
Yeah, habitat is constantly changing. And I think to that point, Chris, no population ever stays at a certain level. I mean, things happen, weather changes. I mean, all this talk of climate change and all this stuff, I've lived up here in Eagle Lake for 20 years now, and I can't help but hear in the climate change, listen to this, and, all of a sudden we have an October moose hunt. Like when Dan was up here last year, we're hunting in T-shirts and,
getting a tan.
Yeah, getting a tan, wondering, is this October? But then I'll talk to some of the locals and I'll be like, you ever see an October like that? Oh, 25 years ago, I remember we hit 90 degrees,
Yeah,
it was like,
that was the term. That was the term.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's constantly changing. I mean, there's an ebb and flow to everything, every species of animal, and you got to obviously factor in the human factor of everything and what that plays for a role in habitat. And going back to, hard truths with Dan, in the audience that he's getting an opportunity to show, it just shows that, there's more to what we're doing out here than just going out and harvesting an animal or killing, whatever they want to call it. It's an ever-changing cycle that is going to lead to an abundance of all these animals over periods of time, and of course with all the ebb and flows it's going to have its ups and downs, but at least we're trying to maintain and have some normalcy to all that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, Dan, a question for the show, when you think about a target listener or viewer, who would it be to you?
The target listener that we have set out to get the attention of is the people who haven't decided.
Yeah.
The people who want to know, that are curious. Obviously the hunting crowd is, they're going to like the show. I mean, that's easy. We've never set out to do that. And I think the antes, you may be able to sway some to at least consider some things. But really, it's a middle ground, and the show, that's really what it's about.
Yeah.
I mean, it's about, there's no preaching.
No, there really is
We
none.
try to take a fairly neutral stance. And really all we're asking folks is to consider what we're showing here.
Right.
Consider the alternatives. Consider if this didn't exist, what would be in its place.
Right.
Consider if the hunters went away in North America, how would we replace that food source?
Right.
And consider that.
Yeah.
Would there be more pig farms, more feedlots, more grocery stores, more chicken farms? I mean, less wild spaces. I mean, that's not easy to replace. I mean, you don't just replace that by eliminating it. Something has. We have a world population, that's encroaching on 7 billion people. I mean, that's significant.
Yes. That's very significant.
Yeah, and how do we feed those people? Well, eliminating hunting and fishing certainly will not help that process.
Right. And I also find engaging with folks, and again, when you grow up in this, you're in the woods, you're in nature, and when you have the chance to connect with someone who is not familiar with these traditions at all, fish out of water, so to speak, I oftentimes find there is a fascination and curiosity, almost as if we really got away from, at times, who we are. You talked about up until 1970, from the dawn of time.
Yeah.
We're all here because of hunters.
No doubt.
And good ones, right?
With bows.
We really are. And I think what I particularly liked about, the shows is there's an engagement in science, with wildlife biologists, and I think that hard truth, that's why it's such a perfect title, because this is a hard reality for, anyone to hear at times. But then there is the cultural piece of it. There is the economic piece of it. And it really pulls together this story of the grand significance of this. Because we can think on a small scale here, Nate, with the operation in Eagle Lake, Maine. It's a very small town. And think about these little outposts, I guess, across the northern 2/3 of Maine. If you were to look at the state of Maine, it's larger than the rest of New England. And we have 1 million people total in the state, and I'm willing to bet the vast majority in the southern part, you think about the guides, the bookkeepers, the butcher shop, the taxidermist, the lodging, the gas station. The trickle-down economics of that is substantial.
We actually talked about that a little bit. Dan and I took a trip to the butcher shop, and we have anywhere from 5 to 8 people working in the shop. I mean, it's for 2-3 months, but it's still substantial, and it still creates revenue. They're all going to go to the grocery stores, and I mean, it's, and then of course with the hunting season, and not just us. I mean, it mostly in the northern part of Maine is where this stuff happens. Of course, there's a smaller voice up here compared to the southern half of the state.
Right.
But for us up here, like Dan said, this is a huge part of it. And then there's forestry and farming, and it all goes hand in hand. Everybody supports one and the other. So
but I think that's true, and I think it's true, across the globe.
Yeah.
I mean, when you get into rural areas where that's where wildlife exists, the impact of hunting, fishing, camping is critical to those areas. I mean, it's the same in marginal lands. If you were to go to many countries in Africa or Pakistan, it doesn't matter where you go. If it's a rural area where wildlife exists, the economics of hunting and outdoor activity is critical to those areas. It applies in the United States. It applies in countries all over the world.
Yeah. So one thing I've always thought, question, like for instance, think moose in Maine. Everyone wants there to be. Stay tuned, folks, while we take a brief break for a word from our sponsors.
Eagle Lake Sporting Camps have been around since the 1890s. The camps sit on a 23,000-acre state reserve, surrounded by forest, loaded with wildlife. Cabins are rustic, bathroom, shower, full bar, great food. If it has to do with outdoors, hiking, biking, camping, hunting, fishing, we can do it. All I can say is, if you're looking to get away, Eagle Lake Sporting Camps has what you're looking for.
To learn more about the Eagle Lake Sporting Camps, please visit eaglelakesportingcamps.com. And now, let's get back to the podcast. Moose forever. Really? I mean, whether you're a hunting guide, whether you're you do scenic tours,
Wildlife viewing.
whatever. Why the disconnect at times, do you think? Why is it so hard to bring that together?
Well, I honestly think it's because of propaganda and things like that. I think I think it's been painted differently than it is, and we kind of covered it early on. We didn't react probably the way we should have.
Yeah.
Because we assumed things that we shouldn't have. But that's where I feel it is. I also feel if you sit down and you talk to someone and you actually, if it's a reasonable person and you start to talk about the science, I mean, the science, it doesn't really lie,
Right.
I mean, there's data.
Right.
I mean, Maine and moose, for instance. I mean, it was hunters that dragged the moose population down, several decades ago.
Right.
Because it was not regulated. Well, hunters decided we need to regulate moose hunting.
Right.
And now the population of moose is, I would assume, the highest other than Alaska in the U.S.
Yeah. The lower 48 for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Very robust.
So you take a population that was in trouble, hunters come in, we don't want to see moose go away.
Right.
So we start to regulate it. We start to fund it. We start to have license systems. We start to have other federal things like Pittman Robertson that fund it. And look at it now. I mean, it's...
Yeah. It's funny. I wish I brought this with me. I sent a picture to Nate. You'd have loved this, Dan. One of my staff members who works for me is big into antiquing and was just out and found a 1945 Maine law book, hunting and fishing law book. And it had all the license fees and all the regulations on prohibition on moose. It was such a piece of history. License fee, $1.30.
Wow. Little inflation there.
But I guess, Dan, to transition here in a second towards another topic here. But what do you think, to the average hunter out there, the charge of how they can kind of help maybe shift that narrative? What do you think are the key things that they could do in their everyday life that they should try to do?
Well, I would say how you talk about it, how you message it to your family, your friends, other folks. I mean, speak from the heart.
Yeah.
Speak about why you do it, not just that you do it. Right. And I think that probably from local folks has the most power, because in this day and age, unfortunately, our communication has shifted from sitting around a table and talking to friends to talking to friends digitally.
Mm-hmm.
So I think our community, the best thing that we could do is when we talk about it, talk from the heart. Talk about why you do it, not just that you do it or that you limit it out today.
Right.
What does that limit mean?
Right.
What does that mean to you? What does that mean to your family? What does that mean to your friends? Talk about the heritage of how you grew up and you did this and what meaning that had to you. And I think that is probably the most substantial thing that we could do. If we speak from deeper than the action,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's better understood.
Yeah. Well said. Very well said. What about you, Nate?
Yeah, I mean, just to mirror that, I mean, it's things can be misconstrued when you're just pushing letters and hitting send or whatever, and people see that, they can take it certain ways. So, going back to like what Dan said, just explain it a little better, if you're going to put that out there for everyone to see, because, especially with these platforms, you're not just putting that out there for your friends. Everyone's seeing that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the more, you can explain why you do what you do, and have it come from the heart. Just try to understand that this is a privilege for us to do what we do, and if this went away, imagine all the wildlife that potentially would become unmanageable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in reality, if this bear hunt didn't happen here in Maine, and it's been close to that happening
Multiple times, actually. It's almost gone away.
If you like seeing moose, you can't have a overabundance of bear, an unhealthy amount of bear, because they are gonna take the calves, the weak, not just the moose but the deer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're a predator and they are good at it.
Right. They're very good at their job in nature. Right. Now, Dan, obviously you're here bear hunting, got a bear. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Have been moose hunting here, families moose hunted here. Just curious, your assessment, you've having traveled as much as you have, what do you find unique about Maine, like hunting in northern Maine, the hunting culture here? I'm sure there's some things that are very common kind of around the globe. As hunters, there's a connection to that. But what have you found unique about this region? I'm always interested in that.
It reminds me a little bit of places I've been in Canada.
Yep.
These kind of vast, high canopy, high forest spaces that are just incredibly beautiful, full of wildlife, because of the dense nature of these forests. The hunting's not easy.
Right.
There's great hunting here, obviously, but
Mm-hmm.
but you're going to work for it because things are dense. Things are. You're not going to. It's not like hunting out west where you're going to see an animal, 300 yards away, and then you're going to pursue it. I mean, things kind of happen as they happen, right? I mean, today's a perfect example.
Yeah.
At one point, I think everybody in the car was thinking, this isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Nobody was saying that, but
It's there.
pretty sure. Pretty sure people were thinking that.
It always happens.
Yeah, but you
Gotta
get into it,
think
you get into the forest, and all of a sudden there's a shift and things change, and something happens, and the next thing you know, it's entirely different than it was an hour ago.
Right.
But I mean, I love it here. It's gorgeous. It's as wild as anywhere else, or more wild than most other places in the States. I agree with Nate, on the managing the bears. We for hard truths of conservation, this year we've spent time looking at bear populations in 3 different states. So we looked at conservation in Oklahoma, we looked at conservation in Arkansas, and then we came to Maine. And Maine has a high density bear population.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is, they're hard to hunt here.
Yeah. Right.
So you have to use different methods and tactics to try to be successful. And luckily we were flexible when I was here, and we took a bear down today, and it's great management for the population of Maine to take these bears out because there's a bunch of them, it's a great recreational activity, but it's also good for wildlife to balance out an ecosystem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know when that show is going to air, Dan?
It'll be season 2 starts in February, and I know we have 3 in the can, this being one of them as of today. So I would guess it'll be on the front end of season 2.
And what time does that usually air?
Season 1, there may be a renegotiation, but season 1 airs at 9 a.m. Eastern Time in the outdoor block on the History Channel. And so it may be different in season 2, but as of now, that's when it's on Saturday mornings, 9 a.m. Eastern.
On the History Channel.
On the History Channel.
Yeah, it's nice too, because if you miss it, you got the they save the show for you. You can go back and watch it, but all the new online ways to go about.
You can stream it.
You can stream it, so that's what I did. I think you'd sent me the show.
Yeah, that's
of course hunting season's a little hard to
right
line that all
9
out.
o'clock Saturday. I'm like, all right, but we got the login.
Got to watch the Moose show.
That's right.
It was good, even though it didn't happen that week. As hard as we tried.
But it's a perfect example of what we do. You know?
Right.
I mean, I think there is. And some people think that every time we go out, we kill something or we harvest something, and
Right.
the fact is that you fail a lot more than you succeed at hunting. I mean, this week is another example of that. Did we succeed? We did, but we succeeded. Late afternoon of the last day here,
Right.
with a lot of effort put in by a whole bunch of people to get it done.
Yeah.
And it could have been a 0.
Yep.
And I would have been fine with that.
Right.
I have no issue with that whatsoever.
Right.
I mean, I think if failure weren't involved, I probably wouldn't do it as much. I mean, the failures what keeps you going,
Right.
It's wild life.
Exactly. But it's perfectly said, and I think the challenges you face in the field make those success moments, where you do accomplish it and harvest that goal that you had, that much more fulfilling.
Dan, we just want to make sure you don't leave early on us, and we get to spend as much time with you as we can.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
But me too. That's why I was making so much noise.
Snapping. We told you to leave those loud clothes at the camp, right?
Oh, we had fun.
No, that's fantastic. Now, to that point, Dan, you're obviously been up here around the moose hunt as well. What are your thoughts, in terms of the uniqueness of moose hunting? I mean, I think it's the most exciting thing in the world when you hear a bull grunt. That's why we do what we do. We live for that. What do you find unique about moose hunting specifically?
Let me jump in there too, because this is pretty cool. Because Dan, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, because I was already wrong once. I'm never gonna live that down. But Dan, you've pretty much hunted moose everywhere.
Well,
or at least all species.
In North America for sure.
Yeah.
I don't have a Western Canada moose, but I do have the Shiras, the Eastern, and the which one am I missing here? The Yukon.
Yeah.
So I've hunted all of them. They've all been totally different. I mean, I actually, if you want to know the truth, I like it the way you do it here the most, because it's very interactive. You're calling, you're raking trees, you're moving, you're glassing. I mean, I really enjoyed the hunt here. I enjoyed all of them. But other places that I've gone, it's been more spot and stock and not as interactive. But moose hunting is really cool. I was really happy when I got my Eastern, because that was the third of the 29 that I needed. I'm going to do I'm supposed to do a hunt in Russia next year for the Kamchatka moose.
Yeah.
With the situation in Russia, I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but
Right.
If so, I'm looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
That's a winter hunt, isn't it? They hunt them in the winter.
Yeah.
Or it'd obviously be like sometime December-ish.
Yes.
Before they
that's
shed.
Right. That's right.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Those things are they're stupid huge. I don't even know. I'd
Supposedly
like
the
lose
biggest.
it if I saw that.
Supposedly the biggest, right?
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and I think it is a unique experience, though. And I think there's a reason it can get in people's blood. Pursuing moose. We talk about that, how, those of us who kind of do this guiding wise, you have that moment that's like seared. I can remember when it kind of happened for me. But it's a blast. It's a blast. And we're what? How many days?
Jeez, we're only
10 days?
Yeah. 10 days roughly, yeah.
10 days.
From our first week moose hunt. It's finally starting to get colder. Starting to feel like moose hunting.
Yeah.
Haven't smelled one yet. Seen some big tracks. Some stuff tore up.
Yeah.
It's looking good. We're pumped.
Did you hear any this week while you were bear hunting?
I didn't.
No. So you usually this coming week.
Yeah, we use the hunters. We take advantage of those noises they hear out there. It's worked in our favors before.
Yeah, when you have the bear client the week before, said, "Man, I heard some animal just screaming down in this bog."
Some woman's out there hollering.
Awesome. Well, Nate, any final questions you have for Dan while we have him here? And we want to keep him here as long
Dan,
as we
are you
can.
going to come back and hunt with us again?
There's
We love
probably
having you.
there's probably a good chance of that.
Yeah.
There's probably a real good chance that you guys run a great operation. This is a great place. I mean, I love it, and I'm sure even if we go back and hunt another black bear, another moose, it'll be just as cool as the last time I was here. So I'm sure I'll be back.
Awesome.
Well, we've, of course, Cabela's, this is just a little piece, but, going on 20 years now with this outfit. I think I told you the story, but, we wanted I was thinking, we needed to diversify ourselves. And, of course, the Cabela's Bible showed up on my doorstep all the time and, spending more and more. And how can I get a discount there? And, ended up becoming an outfitter when Cabela's Outdoor Adventures was going, and that was almost 15 years ago now. So, needless to say, as a kid, growing up with the Cabela's Bible and all the dreams of owning everything that pertains to what we do. Of course, asking my dad for a lot of it at a young age and hearing no a lot.
I used to circle for the holiday.
bend the tops of the pages. So
that's right.
Just really cool, Dan, having you here and having had the opportunity to, talk firsthand about what you guys have done for conservation, and highly recommend all the listeners out there to, go watch the show and take heed to it and listen and learn and observe and take in what you hear. Talk, listen more, talk less, and thank you for everything you've done, and been great having you.
Thank you, Nathan.
Yes.
Thanks, Chris.
Yes, thank you very much.
Enjoyed it.
Yes, absolutely. And to all the listeners out there, be safe. Best of luck to all of those going moose hunting. And God bless. Be well.